You know how people say, never buy a house in an HOA neighborhood? Well, I learned that lesson the hard way. See, I'd just gotten my dream truck. Glossy black, lifted, brand new tires, engine that growled like a lion. It wasn't just transportation, it was years of hard work, overtime shifts, and sacrifices finally paying off. To me, that truck wasn't just metal and rubber, it was freedom. But apparently, to one particular neighbor, it was something else entirely, a free gift for her spoiled son. Now, if you've ever dealt with an HOA Karen, you'll know exactly the type I'm talking about. Blonde highlights, oversized sunglasses even on cloudy days, and that ever-present look like the world owed her something. She strutted around the neighborhood like she was the mayor, when in reality, she was just the loudest voice at the HOA board meetings. Her name was Patricia, but everyone just called her Karen behind her back. Sometimes even to her face, when people were brave enough. At first, it was little things. She'd complain that my truck was too big for the driveway, or that it clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. I brushed it off. After all, my truck was legally parked, clean and well kept. But Karen, she wasn't the type to drop an issue. The real trouble began when her college-aged son came back home for the summer. Let's just say he wasn't exactly the hard-working type. Lazy, entitled, and always blasting music from his beat-up sedan that rattled like it was about to fall apart. One day, I caught Karen eyeing my truck as she walked past with her son. She actually stopped, pointed at it, and said loud enough for me to hear. "Karen, now that's a real truck. Much better than that junker of yours. Wouldn't it be nice if you had something like this to drive around?" Her son smirked. "Yeah, Mom. That'd be sick." At the time, I thought nothing of it. Maybe just jealousy. Maybe just neighborly pettiness. But oh, I had no idea how far she was willing to go. The HOA complaints begin. It started small. Suddenly, I began receiving letters from the HOA. "Your vehicle is improperly parked. Your vehicle is an eyesore to the community. Your vehicle is too loud." All lies. Every single one. I checked the bylaws myself. My truck was perfectly within the rules. But Karen had friends on the HOA board, and it didn't take a genius to see who was behind the sudden wave of complaints. When I refused to budge, she escalated. She marched up to my driveway one afternoon while I was waxing the truck, hands on her hips like she was the sheriff of the cul-de-sac. "Karen, you know, this truck doesn't really belong here. It doesn't fit the neighborhood standard." "Me, Karen, it's my driveway. My truck. I've checked the HOA rules, everything's legal." Her lips curled into a smirk. "Karen, oh, rules are flexible when you know the right people." That was my first warning sign. But the real blow came a week later, when she crossed a line I never thought she'd dare. The attempt. It was a Saturday morning. I woke up to the sound of rattling outside. At first, I thought it was just the garbage truck. But when I peeked out my window, my stomach dropped. Karen's son was in my driveway. And he was inside my truck. I stormed outside, heart pounding, as he fumbled with the steering wheel. The kid had the nerve to look up at me and grin like he was just borrowing it. "Me, what the hell do you think you're doing?" "Son, relax, man. My mom said I could use it. Just for the weekend." That was when Karen appeared on the sidewalk, arms crossed, looking smug. "Karen, oh, don't overreact. He needs a reliable vehicle. You've had that truck long enough. Sharing is what good neighbors do." I couldn't believe it. She actually thought she could just hand my truck over to her son like it was a community toy. I yanked the door open, pulled the kid out, and told them both in no uncertain terms to get off my property before I called the cops. Karen's smile faltered. But then she leaned in and whispered something that made my blood run cold. Karen, you'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. The cops get involved. 2 days later, blue and red lights flashed outside my house. The police. Apparently, someone had reported me for vehicle theft. Imagine my shock when I walked outside and the officers told me they'd gotten a call claiming my own truck was stolen property. And guess who was standing on the curb, arms folded, smug grin plastered across her face? Karen. Karen, that's the man. That's the truck. It doesn't belong to him, it belongs to my son. I almost laughed at the insanity of it all. Almost. But when the cops started asking for proof of ownership, I realized just how dangerous this situation was getting. The flashing lights painted the whole neighborhood red and blue. Curious neighbors peeked from behind curtains, some even standing out on their lawns pretending to water plants, just to get a front row seat to the drama. The 2 officers walked up to me, calm but professional. Officer 1, sir, we've had a report that this vehicle may not legally belong to you. Can we see proof of ownership? I didn't even hesitate. I pulled out my wallet, flipped to my registration, and handed it over. My name. My address. My truck. Crystal clear. The officer examined it, then glanced at Karen, who was still smirking like she had already won. Karen, that paperwork must be fake. I know that truck belongs to my son. He told me so. Her son, standing awkwardly behind her, gave a half-hearted shrug. You could tell even he wasn't fully sold on this ridiculous plan. Me, this is my vehicle. I paid for it. I've got the receipts, the insurance, the title, you name it. The officers exchanged looks. One of them scribbled something on his notepad. Officer 2, all right, we'll need to run the VIN number just to be sure. Standard procedure. I nodded. No problem. I had nothing to hide. But Karen. She looked way too excited, like she thought she was about to win some kind of neighborhood lottery. Karen doubles down. While the officers walked around the truck, Karen started her performance. Karen, loudly, for all the neighbors, this man has been harassing me for weeks. He threatened my son when he simply tried to use his truck. I've had to call the HOA about his aggressive behavior multiple times. I clenched my fists, but I didn't take the bait. She wanted me to explode, to look guilty, to make a scene. Me, calmly, that's not true, and you know it. She smirked. Karen, oh, it's true. And you'll see, the law doesn't protect bullies. Especially ones who steal vehicles from innocent young men. The officers ignored her dramatics and focused on their checks. One typed the VIN into the database, while the other quietly asked me questions about when I purchased the truck, where from, and how I paid. I answered each question with receipts to back it up. Karen, on the other hand, had nothing. No paperwork. No photos. Not even a coherent story. And yet, she wouldn't shut up. Karen, look, officers, I sit on the HOA board. I can assure you, this man is nothing but trouble. He violates rules constantly. I mean, look at this truck. It doesn't belong in our neighborhood. My son deserves it more. He's a good kid. Her son muttered under his breath, Mom, maybe we should. But Karen cut him off with a glare. The officers see through it. Finally, one of the officers approached me with a nod. Officer 1, sir, the registration checks out. The truck is legally yours. Relief washed over me, but I kept my cool. Karen, however, wasn't ready to accept defeat. Karen, no. No, that can't be right. Run it again. He must have forged something. I know that truck was meant for my son. At this point, the officer's patience was wearing thin. Officer 2, unless you can provide proof of your claim, we have no grounds to continue this accusation. Her face turned red. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like a fish out of water. Karen, I'll take this to the highest level. You'll regret siding with him. The officers gave me back my documents, apologized for the inconvenience, and turned to leave. But Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She stormed up to me, jabbing her finger in my chest. Karen, whispering angrily, you think you've won. I don't give up that easy. I'll make sure you lose that truck one way or another. I didn't respond. I just stared her down until she huffed and stomped off with her sulking son in tow. The calm before the storm. For the next few days, things were tense. Karen avoided me, but I could feel her eyes burning into me whenever I drove past her house. The HOA letters kept coming, parking violations, noise complaints, even an accusation that my truck was environmentally damaging. It was harassment, plain and simple. But I knew if I lost my temper, she'd twist it to her advantage. What Karen didn't know, what none of the neighbors knew, was that I had an ace up my sleeve. See, I wasn't just some random homeowner. I had connections. And one of my closest friends. He just happened to be the state attorney. At first, I didn't want to involve him. It felt like overkill. But as the complaints piled up and Karen's threats grew bolder, I realized she wasn't going to stop. She was going to keep pushing until something broke. And I wasn't about to let it be me, or my truck. You'd think after being humiliated in front of the cops, Karen would have backed off. But if there's one thing I've learned about people like her, it's that they never know when to quit. A week later, I came home from work to find a bright yellow sticker slapped across my truck's windshield. Vehicle to be towed, HOA violation. I tore it off, furious. Another bogus claim. I checked the HOA bylaws again. Nothing I was doing violated a single rule. My truck wasn't oversized, wasn't parked illegally, and it certainly wasn't abandoned. This was Karen's handiwork, plain as day. Sure enough, I didn't have to wait long to see her marching over with her ever-present clipboard. Karen, that truck will be gone by morning. The HOA board voted, and it's not compliant. Consider this your final notice. Me, funny, because I am the HOA member who asked to see the meeting minutes. And guess what? There was no such vote. Her face twisted. She hadn't expected me to know the rules better than she did. Karen, rules change when the community agrees, and I represent this community. Me, no, Karen. You represent yourself. And right now, you're harassing me. Again. I walked away, but inside, I was boiling. She wasn't just being a nuisance anymore. She was trying to outright steal my property through intimidation and fake authority. The tow truck incident. The very next morning, I woke up to the rumble of a diesel engine. Peeking out my window, I saw a tow truck backing into my driveway. I bolted outside. Me, hey. What the hell do you think you're doing? The driver, looking uncomfortable, scratched his neck. Tow driver, got a call from the HOA. Said this vehicle is unauthorized and needs to be removed. I shoved my ownership papers in his face. Me, this is my truck. You're trespassing. If you so much as hook a chain to it, you'll be the one facing charges. The tow driver froze, then glanced over his shoulder, at Karen, who was standing on the sidewalk, smug as ever, recording the whole thing on her phone. Karen, it's an HOA matter, sir. Just do your job. The driver sighed. Tow driver, lady, I need a signed legal order. Without that, I can't touch it. Karen's triumphant grin collapsed in an instant. Karen, what? You don't need paperwork. I am the authority here. The driver shook his head and drove off, muttering something about crazy neighborhoods. I turned to Karen. Me, strike two, Karen. Her face went crimson. She stormed back to her house, screaming something about calling real authorities. The HOA meeting showdown. A few days later, the HOA scheduled an emergency meeting. I knew immediately who was behind it. Sure enough, when I walked in, there was Karen at the front of the room, smug and self-righteous, ready to put on another performance. She launched into a speech about how my truck destroys neighborhood values, how I was threatening the safety of the community, and, get this, how I had stolen it from her son. Half the board members looked skeptical. The other half were clearly her friends, nodding along. When they gave me the floor, I calmly pulled out a thick folder. Receipts. Registration. Insurance. HOA bylaws highlighted in bright yellow. Me, everything Karen has said tonight is a lie. I have the paperwork to prove it. And if this harassment doesn't stop, I'll be forced to take legal action against her and anyone on this board who enables her. The room went quiet. For the first time, Karen didn't have a comeback. She sputtered, turned red, and tried to redirect the conversation, but the damage was done. Neighbors who had been on the fence were now openly rolling their eyes at her. Some even muttered under their breath, calling her out. It was clear, her little empire of control was cracking. The final straw. But Karen wasn't about to accept defeat. Oh no, she had one last card to play. The very next evening, I came home to flashing lights once again. Another police car. I sighed, already knowing who had made the call. Sure enough, there she was, arms folded, smirk plastered on her face like she was the star of some TV courtroom drama. Karen, officers. That man threatened me at the HOA meeting. I don't feel safe with him in this neighborhood. The officers gave each other that look, you know, the one that says, here we go again. I kept my cool. Me, officers, I'd be happy to discuss this. But first, I want to make a call. You see, I think this has escalated to a point where a higher authority needs to be involved. Karen laughed. Karen, oh, please. Who are you going to call? Your lawyer. I smiled. Me, no. The state attorney. For the first time, Karen's smirk wavered. The moment I said those words, the state attorney Karen's smirk faltered. For weeks she had played her little power games, certain that the HOA board and her fake authority made her untouchable. But now, she realized I wasn't bluffing. The officers looked at me, curious. Officer 1, you know the state attorney? Me, yes, sir. He's a close friend. And given the repeated false reports, harassment, and attempted theft, I think it's time he's made aware of the situation. I pulled out my phone and made the call right there in front of everyone. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. State attorney, hey. What's going on? Me, sorry to bother you this late, but I've got a situation. False police reports, harassment, and attempted property theft. My neighbor claims my truck belongs to her son, and has involved the HOA, police, and even a tow company. There was a pause. Then his voice hardened. State attorney, put me on speaker. I did. State attorney, to the officers, gentlemen, this man is a personal friend of mine. I can assure you his vehicle is legally owned. I'll be opening an inquiry into the repeated false reports made against him. Please take detailed notes. The officer's posture immediately shifted. They nodded respectfully. Karen, on the other hand, looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under her. Karen, wait, this isn't fair. He's lying. He doesn't really know you. The voice on the phone cut her off. State attorney, this is the state attorney. And if you continue, I'll have you speak to my office directly about filing knowingly false police reports. Do you understand? Karen's jaw dropped. She opened her mouth to argue, but no sound came out. Her son tugged at her sleeve, muttering, "Mom, let's just go." The aftermath. The officers finished their notes, handed me a card, and assured me they'd document everything. They left without another word to Karen. And for the first time since this whole mess started, Karen had no words. No smirk. No threats. She just stormed back to her house in silence. Over the next week, the fallout was swift. The HOA board called an emergency session, not for me, but for her. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd been harassing. Other neighbors finally came forward, telling stories of bogus violations, threats, and manipulations. The board voted to strip her of her position. And when the state attorney's office began sniffing around, Karen suddenly became very, very quiet. The sweetest victory. One afternoon, about 2 weeks later, I was polishing my truck when I noticed a moving van outside Karen's house. She was leaving. No smug smile. No oversized sunglasses. Just a defeated woman stuffing boxes into a van while avoiding eye contact with every neighbor on the street. Her son slouched beside her, muttering something I couldn't hear. I didn't say a word. I just leaned against my truck and watched. Sometimes silence is the loudest victory. Reflection. That truck still sits in my driveway today, shining, powerful, and mine. Every time I see it, I'm reminded of two things. Some people will try to take what they didn't earn. And people like Karen. They always overplay their hand. Because at the end of the day, bullies crumble when you stand firm, and when you have the law and the truth on your side. And that's how my HOA Karen tried to steal my truck for her son, and ended up losing everything instead.